You want to be a architect,
Maybe a truck driver?
maybe a realtor.
Something in the medical field?
Huh. Listen to Career Paths with Unedited on that.
Thursdays. All right, we got the recording going. Welcome to Career Paths. I'm your host, Ryan King, and with me today we have Earl Gleason. How you doing, Earl?
Doing great today, Ryan, and yourself?
Doing good. So first, let's start with a little bit of background about yourself. Tell us your history, married, divorced, kids.
Well, I actually have a very interesting history, and I'll give you a brief capture of it. Just as kind of a cutesy, I'm probably the only domestic terrorist you'd ever meet that actually got away with it.
Okay.
And I was born in Los Alamos, New Mexico in 1977 in a snowstorm.
Wow.
Had to be flown to Albuquerque via fixed wing aircraft. The only way that they could do that was to go through the White Sands Missile Base, which of course is the home of the atomic bomb. I got on the runway and I crashed. They had to get me stabilized. There was another plane that was waiting to use the only runway I was sitting on. You might recognize that plane. It was Air Force One.
Wow.
Complete with President Jimmy Carter.
Huh.
So from the moment my birth was literally an international incident, I was born 3.5 months premature. I'm classified as a spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, although I function closer to a paraplegic. My lower body is much more greatly affected than my upper body is. And I always had a mother behind me to push me to be going to the next step. I entered the school system in a culture where they basically wanted to teach me to sweep floors and wipe tables and do all that. They wanted to put me in the special ed classes entirely. And my mom was like, no way. No way in heck. We had an IQ test done. At that point in time, I had a IQ that was literally off the charts. And so the compromise that we came to was that I would only use special education services for things such as testing and things that took me a little bit longer or needed to be modified in format.
Okay.
So just as a brief side note, for those that aren't aware of education law for the disabled, it's not uncommon for someone with a disability to be kept in the public education system until the age of 21. That is very common. I graduated at 17 and a half as a sophomore in college because I had taken concurrent classes starting when I was 15. After I graduated from high school, I was actively recruited by the University of Denver. I spent 2.5 years at the University of Denver, focusing primarily in areas such as digital media, communications, and broadcast journalism, which is where I thought my career was going because I had spent much of my younger life doing large telethons for United Cerebral Palsy with the likes of John Ritter when he was alive. And now that mantle has been kind of picked up by Ashton Kutcher's brother, although I have stepped away from that particular scene. And an unfortunate accident caused me to leave DU. I took a long time off to sort of recover from the accident. Had a fantastic marriage that went south, and then I got another one that was challenging to say the least, but very enjoyable. And that unfortunately is coming to an end now as well. And now I'm back, and I came to the realization that I needed to finish my degree if I was going to get basically any kind of a job, because one of my physical limitations is my typing speed and various things like that. Yes, federal law does allow for certain allowances for stuff like that, but I tried the job at $11 an hour. I loved the job. They didn't love me. I was constantly subject to performance improvement plans to try it. I was working at a call center and constantly under review to try to get my handle times down, which physically wasn't possible. I was maxing myself out. Doing the job, making better money than what I could pull in on just Social Security alone, which is back to where I'm at now. And so I decided to re-enter college, and in December I will be graduating with a Bachelor's of Arts with a concentration in criminal justice and political science. And from there, who knows? Probably some form of legal action. I'm considering going after, considering either going directly to law school or getting a master's in legal studies and then going after a PhD in higher ed, to put me into the college system, because that's where I'd really like to be. I would
So
have
you would
considered.
You would rather do some teaching
going the
than
judiciary route, with the exception of the fact that for me to get into the higher courts, which is where I would have wanted to have been, you needed at least 10 years of experience in Colorado before you can even get to the local bench, much less move anything up. And I did an internship with a fantastic attorney. I loved it. But it was enough to let me know that I didn't want to be a paper pushing attorney.
Yeah.
If I could get where I wanted to go within the judicial system, then that would have been great. And when I started checking out the details of it and realized understandably the time frames involved and my age and my physical challenges, right now it looks like my end game is going to be a mixture of a life coaching and spiritual enlightenment podcast that I have in development. First episode will probably be released sometime over this weekend, and likely going on either for my Juris Doctorate in law or most likely my master's in legal education, and then my educational doctorate degree to be able to teach at the college level.
So now you said you did schooling for media and that type of area. Did you finish schooling on that? Did you get a degree or?
Well, not exactly. The way a liberal arts degree is structured is you got to have so many different credits in 4 different disciplines. It's a combined degree. So my background in broadcast media and print journalism goes into my overall liberal arts degree. The only reason why I don't list it as a concentration is I do have a few lower credits in that field, because when I came back over the mountain, their political science and criminal justice programs were so much stronger than their broadcast journalism that then became my concentration. So those become the listed concentrations of my degree.
Okay. So with your challenges and stuff, I'm I'm sure your answer is going to be a lot different than other people's. But so college, what was some of your biggest challenges, not only getting into college, but then during college? I mean, I know a lot of times it's financial for a lot of people, but then, you know, what's the other challenges besides take money out of the factor?
Well, you know, it's interesting you should mention that because I had that exact experience when the University of Denver came after me out of high school. They came after me so aggressively that they did take money out of the equation because God knows I couldn't afford a school of that caliber without it happening. And when you have a disability and you're going through up through high school, through the graduation level, you're covered under what they call Public Law 94-142, also commonly referred to as the Ideal Act. And so when I began negotiating with GU as to some of the different accommodations that I would need, you know, in terms of dormitories and just the logistics of getting around campus, because even though that school was formed in the 1800s, they had never had anybody with a physical disability like mine before. So I actively was recruited out of a conference that I did. I did a large international conference. It happened to be that their dean of faculty was in the audience. I had no idea. I was traveling around the state looking at colleges, had my 3 or 4 top picks that I went and visited. That in itself was a very unique experience. And I went to the school that I wanted to go to, and they told me not even to, that was my top pick, and they told me not even to bother to apply because didn't have geometry on my transcripts. Because of visual deficits, I could not take geometry. So I went and I talked to the head of the department, and he says, you know, and this is when I thought I was headed down the broadcast journalism track, and he says, you know, in my some 30 years of doing this, I don't think I've ever used it. We'll do a departmental admission. We'll bypass the admissions process entirely. And of course, that was a state-run school, and I knew I had what it took to get in there because I was being recruited by a borderline Ivy League school. So I called home that night, and Grandma said, "This lady needs to talk to you, and she needs to talk to you tonight." I said, "Okay." We're talking 11 o'clock at night. I had just had a horrible experience at the college that I talked to, and I said, "I'll take the number down and call her in the morning." She says, "No, she needs to talk to you tonight." I said, "It's almost midnight." She says she don't care. So I took the name and number down, and I called this lady, and she says, "You're traveling the state looking at colleges, right?" I said, "Yep." She says, "You are coming by the University of Denver, right?" I said, "Nope. Have absolutely no plan to do that." Well, to make a long story short, we went round and round on that for about 2 or 3 minutes. "Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not." Driving each other nuts. And she says, "You have no idea who I am." But she says, "I'll tell you, if you want to get into college anywhere in this state, you'll be at this building at 9:30 in the morning." "Yes, ma'am." Hung up the phone, said, "Mom, we're headed to Denver." She says, "No, we're not." I said, "Yes, we are." And here we go again. So they had me go. I had the distinct pleasure of going building through building and telling them what modifications their contractors would need to get a contractor to make in order to make the buildings that we could alter accessible. And I say that because of the age of the institution, there are a lot of those buildings that there's just nothing we could do with.
Yeah.
So we had a lot going on, and keep in mind, I was I was 17 and mom was helping me with all of this. And we had finalized the plan. And here's a little tip for those that are finding themselves in similar situations. If you're in a situation where somebody is offering you accommodation, ask for about 25 to 30% more than what you expect them to actually provide.
Makes sense.
Because the reality is that's probably what you're going to get.
Yeah.
They're only going to put out so much money. And that's assuming that they even offer to do so at all. Things have changed dramatically in the higher ed. Not necessarily because the law has, but just because we're finally getting a culture because of the inclusion movement, which, by the way, I'm against, and I can explain why in a minute for anybody that's curious. We're getting a culture where more and more disabled people are hitting the college ranks. And so you don't get as many of those calls of, hey, how do I do this? As we used to. I've spent my life pretty much on the forefront of disabled advocacy, working with everything, reworking courthouses for accessibility, reworking even television stations, and then we had a major negotiation going on. I had him dealing with mom because I was still finishing up what was left of my senior year of high school at that point. Overnight, I had turned 18. Well, guess what? The college couldn't talk to mom anymore without my permission. So everything came to a stall. We finally got everything worked out. I signed the necessary paperwork to allow mom to finish advocating on my behalf. And I enter college no longer as a Concord high school student, realizing that the federal law had changed totally. I had gone under the protections of Public Law 94-142, lived under that for 13 years. And the minute I jumped to the college level, I was covered by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1964.
Why is that?
Because of the fact that Public Law 94-142 only covers you through secondary education, only covers you through graduation of high school.
Okay.
Then the law changes, folks. In some ways for the better, in some ways not. And for the purpose of anybody that will watch this podcast, I'll give you something interesting to think about. And that is, you may be looking at yourself saying, why would I need to know this information? But I actually heard it put just the other night best by comedian Josh Blue when he was on EGT. He said, the disabled is the only minority that you're only one bad bike ride away from joining.
Boy, that's the truth.
And I I mean, it can happen to anybody. I had always looked at it as I've been on the forefront of the physical disability movement because I was blessed with the challenges of knowing a chair since birth, having the chronic pain once I hit my early 20s, having to figure out the mental game of how to get out of bed in the morning. Yes, my physical body is a wreck, folks. It's all up here. It's all up here. And it doesn't matter. I know you and I have had discussions before, Toby, about the fact that even in your position, the mental game is everything. There's going to be those days that you don't want to get out of bed.
100%.
I got more of them than most.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I got more of them than most. I was able to get in the chair 15 minutes before this broadcast. There was a very serious possibility I was going to have to do this podcast from bed because my body just wasn't cooperating today. And the thing is the big message that I sent out that's going to be the underlying message that hopefully will be on your upcoming platform once I hopefully help you get it developed.
Yeah.
Is that intellectual and spiritual understanding, regardless of faith, this is not a religious statement. Intellectual and spiritual understanding of oneself would allow you to transcend any physical challenge that you'll come across. Everything you face is framed in how you look at it. Whether you believe in a higher power or not is irrelevant. You've got a life spirit in you somehow, that there is a purpose that you're here to serve. I don't know what it is. It's different for everybody. If you'd asked me 20 years ago, I'd have told you I was going to be a broadcast journalist.
Now, you did do some motivational speaking and such, correct?
About 20 years worth.
Wow. 20
It
years.
started before I was even a teenager. Yeah. A lot of it was unpaid. A lot of hours, a lot of time on the road. And the big thing that I had there, and one of the reasons I stepped away from it, is just exactly kind of the reason why I've covered some of the details with you that I have here. The only thing that the calls quit coming when I started telling the honest to God truth about what I went through.
Yeah.
They only want the highlights. Life is not a success-only journey, folks.
No, it's not.
I don't care who you are. Life is not a success-only journey. But yet that was the message that, at least in the room that I was lecturing in, that was what was getting the calls. The highlights, starting with the funny story about the President of the United States, touching over the first time I was able to open a refrigerator on my own and drop a couple eggs, and then up through the challenges of college. The ironic thing is, when I went through the University of Denver, I probably gave them a couple of $1 million worth of renovations that would have been needed to have done that campus. I never did see the final numbers, but I asked for the moon, and they gave me 100% of it, and then some. I went to the head of facilities that I was working with, and I said, "What the hell happened?" Because, like I said, I worked with these others before, and I'm used to getting maybe between 50 and 70% of what I asked for.
Yeah.
And you guys have everything. And he says, what you don't understand is I was told that it didn't matter if you said you needed a purple goat in your dorm room. I was not to question it. I was to find a purple goat.
Huh.
We need you here. And
why would you say that is?
I think it's because I then worked with the administration to form one of the most aggressive recruiting programs for a college of that caliber for the disabled on the planet. They wanted more like me, and the only way they could do it was figure out how to make it work. That required millions of dollars worth of renovations. I can say that pretty easily. Like I said, I never seen the final numbers, but I have a pretty good idea, because there were 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there were about 9 different buildings some of which we had to make structural changes such as ramps and door openers and everything else too. That stuff don't come cheap.
No.
You could probably speak that better than anybody about that. But the fact is, once again, I was on the forefront of an educated person with a physical disability. And the only reason that that could happen was because I had a mother behind me that wouldn't take no for an answer. Let me tell you a sad little story, and you can use a clip part of it if you want. I had a young lady that was chairbound that went to school with me. Her parent, her mother, nobody really advocated for this young lady. When we started school, the preschool testing that they gave us, she actually came in with a higher intellect than I did.
Wow.
The difference is nobody advocated for her, and she didn't know how to seek that advocation. So fast forward 13 years together, she's graduating at 21, having been held in the system through 21. I'm graduating at 17. They get ready to do the senior trip that you take as kind of your last hurrah of high school. My high school class decided they wanted to go whitewater rafting. Not a good idea for me. So I went to the school and I said, you know, what if I took a sponsor with me so that it could be an officially sponsored trip, and we'll go to the hot springs and get a massage and do not, and I'll just kind of do my own thing. If somebody else wants to come with me, that's great. If not, that's great too. Okay. And I said, oh, by the way, while you're at it, you might want to work out something for Francis. And so 2 or 3 days later, the date that all the seniors were supposed to take the trip was coming up. And I asked her, I said, Francis, did the school talk to you about you being able to take a senior trip? She goes, yeah, I'm so excited. I get to go someplace I've never been before. I said, oh, really? What are you going to do? She says, did you realize there's a thing called the mall in Grand Junction? Which is 40 miles down the road from where I was living at the time in Delta. It's now where I reside. But at this point, at that point in my life, it was 40 miles down the road. You know, a blink of an eye, I'd spent countless weekends there myself.
Yeah.
Nobody even advocated for this young lady enough for her to be in a public mall, because the general societal attitude is the minute you put on wheels, you don't have a brain. I'm sorry, folks, but that's the reality that we're dealing with. It's starting to change. I'm beginning to see more and more of different types of physical disabilities in higher education. My school has an enrollment of approximately 10,000 students. There's maybe, and this is just judging on what I've seen, I've never seen the official numbers, maybe 60 would probably be being generous of us that have, I would say probably closer to 20 that have profound physical disabilities. I mean, you'll have those that have some level of something, but it doesn't really affect their educational functioning.
Right.
So I don't really consider that. But of those of us that require intensive accommodations, there's probably maybe between 20 and 60 of us in a college population of approximately 10,000.
Wow. That's really quite low numbers.
Yeah, but it's better than it was in 96.
Yeah.
In 96, sure. I was the only one in a very selective school that had a total of enrollment of probably around 4,500 because they're so selective. And I was the only one there. one of the accommodations that they had to ask for that you wouldn't think about was they had to put me in a graduate dormitory. The grad school dormitory, because those were the only rooms that were big enough for my wheelchair and all the adaptive equipment and all the stuff that I needed to succeed. So here I was, an 18-year-old in there with a bunch of 20-somethings. Well, you can guess what happened. I got stupid. I'll admit to it. I got stupid. Arguably one of the sharpest people on the face of the earth got stupid.
Can you elaborate on that? What?
You know, the alcohol.
Okay.
And the other thing is that credit card companies just love to give college students credit cards. As if the school wasn't putting you in enough debt.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came out of DU. I had gotten stupid with the plastic. Stupid with a few other things. I didn't flunk out. What caused me to leave there was actually a physical accident. They had decided I only had one egress to the main part of campus. And they had decided that they had too many people driving on the sidewalk. Now, the interesting part of this is I had been there for 3 years. The only time I had ever seen anybody drive on that sidewalk was once when it was a facilities management truck that needed to do something to the next door dormitory. Other than that, I'd never seen anybody drive on that sidewalk. But they decided that they were tired of people driving on the sidewalk. So they put a bar across the opening to that sidewalk that in theory I'd have to maneuver my way around. The only thing was they didn't tell me it was there. And I have visual deficits. One of the things that I cannot do is I have no spatial judgment. I cannot see curves. The world is two-dimensional. I cannot judge my distance between myself and an impending object. On top of that, the morning after they put that in, I had a final and we had one heaven of a snowstorm. So I was going to class in virtual whiteout conditions in a power chair.
Wow.
Moving as fast as it would go, not realizing that bar was there. I had a service dog. He couldn't see it either because he was wiped out. Boom. Right across the chin, over the face. My arm immediately went spastic, hit the stick, and I just continued going right under it. It was so cold, I didn't even realize how injured I was, so I continued to go to class. Went the 2 blocks to go to class and showed up. The teacher says, "What the heck are you doing here?" I said, "Well, you got a final I got to take." She goes, "Not in your condition, you aren't." I said, "Why?" She says, "Go like this." And ironically, this teacher was the same gal that had recruited me a few years later, or a few years prior. She's the same gal I had talked to that night on the phone. And so I had a relationship with her. She goes, "Go like this." And I pull my hand back from my face and it was absolutely covered in blood. I went back over to student student health services, which ironically was in the building that, had I realized I was injured, was right next to me. After I hit the bar, I wouldn't have had to go anywhere but up the ramp and up an elevator. They took one look at me, sent me to Denver General. Denver General says, "How are you even alive? How did you not instantly break your neck?" I don't know. Some power beyond me has some plan for me. You know, I tried to fight my way through that, worked with the school, cut back one semester to where I was only taking one class that required me to only go on the weekends because I was a world-ranked collegiate debater. So I was able to do debate on the weekends and do nothing during the week. But the drop in credits caused me to lose my scholarships because I didn't have full time. So that led to my partying at DU. And honestly, there was a degree of shock that went into that, because I was recruited to that caliber of school to the extent that about 48 hours before I started, I got a phone call saying, "Oh, by the way, it'd be nice if you'd file an application so that we could formally admit you," after they'd invested God knows how much money getting things ready
Yeah.
for me. I hadn't even applied there, folks. And so it's like, hey, great. Now that we've done all this, it would be nice if you'd actually request to go here so that we could get this done.
So did you ever do that?
I'm like, I filed the application, I filed the essay. Cute little caveat to that: when that first time that I visited campus, the reason she wanted me there at 9:30 or 9 o'clock, whatever it was, sharp at that particular building, was in order to get into that college, you had to have an admissions interview. And so the first thing that I was rushed into, without me knowing it, was an admissions interview. My mom, who they would not allow to come in with me, which, one way or the other, I needed to get it done. So I went in, I sat down with the lady, and she says, "Well," she goes, "I don't even know why we're going through this, because there are powers above me that tell me just to take it through the process. You need to go talk to whatever." Well, in the meantime, Mom's talking to the other parents that are in the waiting room, and there was one couple there that said, how long has your son been waiting for an interview? My daughter's been waiting 5 years.
Wow.
She's been waitlisted for 5
5
years.
years.
Imagine the awkwardness of explaining that
You didn't even plan on going there in the first place.
I didn't even plan on going there in the first place. I didn't even know what in the name of heaven I was going there for. Much less the fact that I was going to have to help them rebuild the campus, structure further recruiting efforts, that I still have a working relationship with the university, with regard to reviewing applicable candidates, because since I was there for 2.5 years, I have an idea of the kind of mental acuity that it takes to survive in that environment. So if there's, and I have dealt with every range of disability that you could come across, from somebody that's just got a lazy eye, and I'm not exaggerating, down to somebody that's a complete ventilator dependent and needed 2 to 3 attendants with them just to get through the day. In fact, that's part of the reason why I gave up the public speaking. I went into an environment. I was scheduled to do 3 presentations at City, 13 cities in 14 days. Do the math on that. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Crisscrossing the state. You basically started at 8 o'clock in the morning, had an 8 o'clock presentation, a 1 o'clock presentation, a 6 o'clock presentation for the public in the evening. Back up, you're zooming to the next city because you're on state funds, so they aren't going to fly you. They'd cover our gas to the next city. You turn around and do it again for 14 days straight. And finally, on
who was it that you were
night,
speaking to during these?
Primarily at that point, it was primarily educators, student. One of the reason for 3 presentations was one of the presentations was geared more towards educators. One of the presentations was geared towards what I call specially blessed students. And the final presentation was a combination of educators, the parents, and the general public. I mean, depending on the size of the city I was in, I was literally talking to a packed convention center at that last presentation of the various cities. And I showed up in the final city, which was a suburb of Denver, about 4.5 hour drive from home, but was about a 9 hour drive from where I had just done a presentation, and set up the slide projector, because that was in the days before PowerPoint was really a thing, and you could make it easy that way. Set up the slide projector, got ready to go for the first presentation. And to be honest, I looked out there and there was 2 full rows of ventilator dependent power chairs. What sunk into me was, is it possible for those folks? Yeah, it would be, possibly, given the right kind of support. Anything's possible. But what's the reality of getting the kind of support you need to get where I'm at? And what convicted me in doing that was the fact that I was giving false hope. That goes back to the point that I could only give the highlights. I wasn't required to give a legal disclaimer that my results were atypical. Looking back on it now, yes, I probably should have.
Yeah.
Be honest, looking back on it now, yes, I probably should have. Yes, these results are atypical. The system is not built for you to do this, but it is possible. And I think that's the message that the general public, if there's 2 or 3 takeaways that you would have off of anything that I've said, actually, I'm going to give you 4, just as kind of a thing. Number 1, what used to be an associate's degree is now pretty much a bachelor's degree for entry level. It used to be entry level jobs you could get with an associate's. Now the job market is leaning more toward the bachelor's as the entry level degree. The other thing is, I don't care who you are, it's possible. If you got the drive enough. The big question that motivates me every day, I only deal with 2 of the big questions, and that is the how and the why. Why am I doing what I'm going to do? And then how am I going to get it done? Because the how allows me to find and plug into whatever resources I need to plug into. And the why is what gets me up to do it.
I think the majority of people need to just focus on those 2 things. I think too many people get too crowded with other issues and don't focus on just those 2 things. And
let me tell you what,
right.
of the 2, in my opinion, the more important is the why.
Yeah, I agree.
If you don't have that reason to fight through, I'm going to use myself as an example here. If you don't have a reason to fight through physical pain that is so far above a 1 to 10 hospital chart that it's ridiculous. If you don't have that motivation to even, and trust me, I've had those periods. I went into a very deep depression in a number of different twists and turns in my life. Sent me into that depression road where I just didn't have the why. I just didn't give a damn. And I'll be honest, the interesting wrinkle is I had no plans of going back to finish my degree. After what happened at the University of Denver, I had no plans to go back and finish my degree. Series of results that were beyond my control happened. And it turned out that I wasn't going to have a roof over my head. Because of my mom's contract with the landlord, I couldn't stay with her here. So I ended up in a nursing home for a month. I ended up in a nursing home for a month while I figured things out. And finally, we renegotiated things to where I at least temporarily could stay with my mom. And I got out and she goes, hey, why don't you go talk to Mesa about getting back into school? That way you could live in the dorms. I thought, you know what? That's a pretty good idea. So I went and talked to them and I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, I want to live in the dorms. And they said, how old are you? I said, I'm 42. They said, you're too old to live in the dorms. I figured, out of hell with it. If I'm here, I might as well re-enroll and finish.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what I've done. Or am in the process of doing. The COVID pandemic was a whole other story, because I had a university that wasn't prepared to go to a completely digital pivot. I honestly could have helped them prepare for that had they asked. And they did ask with regards to the disabled population what my opinion was, because I was one of the first that they pulled out for my own safety. Okay,
Yeah.
let's get you out of this environment for your own safety, back when we didn't understand what the COVID thing was going to be all about. And I deal with my favorite professor is, I hesitate to guess at his age, but he's probably in his 70s. The guy is lucky to check his email, much less know how to get into a Zoom meeting or anything else. So I ended up having to drop classes because with the way that I learn, the university wasn't prepared to go completely digital. So I ended up essentially just keeping enough credits to remain active at the university so they didn't completely deactivate me to get through most of the COVID pandemic. Okay, so then we slowed down here in Western Colorado. So I went back and tried again. Well, guess what? Community numbers hit 5%. So for my own safety, I was back in quarantine again. So at this point, I'm going through the third time of the same classes that I was taking a year and a half ago. If it hadn't been for the COVID pandemic, I'd be done.
Well, so
but the moral of the story there is, at any given time, and I can speak with authority because I've been there, pardon my French, but at any given time, it is very easy to get caught up in the oh to hell with it attitude.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy to, you may not know what you want to do. I'll tell you God's honest truth. I thought I was coming out with a bachelor's in criminal justice. My degrees was, my focus was so focused in the legal criminal justice community that I thought I was coming out with a bachelor's in criminal justice. Right before COVID hit, I went and I met with my criminal justice advisor, and he says, well, now that your transfer credits have come in, we discovered that you're 32 credits short of a criminal justice degree, and they got to be in these specific classes. The way I got it figured, it'd take you another year and a half. You can switch it over to a liberal arts degree and be done in 2 semesters. I'm 44 years old, folks. If I'd have been in my 20s, I probably would have taken that other year and a half. I've got that much of a passion for particularly the legal side of the criminal justice system. I was raised by a first responder. My mom was a paramedic growing up, so I was around cops for various reasons. I've had positive tangles with the court. Mom and I worked together to do a number of estates, probate estates for people that didn't have anybody else to do it. So there was a couple of court appointments that my mom had that I was able to do the behind the scenes work for. So I had some exposure to the courts through that. And I realized I loved it. You might be asking yourself, well, you lived your younger life in front of a television camera. Why didn't you finish going into broadcast journalism? Well, the answer to that is simple too. The world I wanted to get into, people don't jump straight to the anchor desk.
Yeah.
You had to go through the field reporting. I can't even drive. How am I going to get to a remote story?
Right.
Remote stories don't always happen in physically accessible locations.
No.
So that's the other takeaway is, even though you may have a love, pick your battles. Luckily, the world is becoming increasingly more digital, so I'm able to get the message out there through things like this. Yeah, I could have very easily. Let me share just briefly. I know you're probably wanting to wrap up. Let me share a very dramatic story with you. I had the opportunity to meet the doctor that saved my wife. Probably in the 70s, probably one of only a handful of doctors in the country that had that would have had the skill and the knowledge to pull me through a series of conditions that had a less than 2% survival rate.
Wow.
If that gives you an idea.
That's,
And it just so happened that he was available in Albuquerque, that he worked at Bernalillo County Medical Center. And when I was in my 20s, going through that area, Mom said, I don't know if we can find him, don't even know if he's still alive, but I'll take you to the hospital where we're born and we'll see if we can find the doctor that saved your life. Mom had always put this man, understandably so, on such a pedestal that he would have been close to God himself, because he did the impossible. He saved a kid that quite frankly wasn't supposed to be saved, according to medical science. And so we went up. Ironically, the nurse that was working the NICU that day had been there an awfully long time. And the reason I say that is because I'm in my 20s and she recognized my mom. She says, you're looking for Dr. Donald Blossom. Mom goes, yeah, do you have his contact information? She goes, I'll have him call. Well, his wife ended up calling back and we decided we were going to surprise him. And that we'd show up the next day and surprise him. And so I went down to the gift shop, and one of the parts of the story that I did not tell about the airplane was when I finally got to Bernalillo County Medical Center. I was in such dramatic shape that I wasn't supposed to make it. So the nurse that took care of me in the ICU drew a picture of a tortoise and wrote my name in its shell with the caption, only those who stick their necks out will survive. Side note, I had an older brother with a heart condition, pentalogy of flow. For those of you that might be interested, it's ironically the same condition that believe it was Jimmy Kimmel's child was born with here a few years ago. Medical science is such that now that's a correctable condition. The reason it got that way is because lives were lost trying to correct it, including my brother, in the hands of the same doctor. So, along with a few other heart specialists, etc. But I spent the night before that meeting going, my God, what do you say to the man that short of God himself is the reason you exist? Thank you seems like such an insignificant word. If you could figure out how to put that into words, please let me know, because I still haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
And but I went down to the gift shop of the hospital that I was born in, and it happened that they had 2 pewter turtles in their curio cabinet. Well, I've carried that turtle and that life symbol with me all the way through my life. So I purchased that turtle, and I hand wrote, which, keep in mind, took me hours because of my physical stuff. I hand wrote a thank you card. We went to this guy's house. He literally lived up on a house on a hill. Mom went up to get him because there's no way I could get up there. Coming down, it literally was like God descending from on high. It was one of those things that you're seeing this mountain of a man. I kid you, he must be about 6'8", and I'm not joking.
Wow. Yeah.
Mountain of a man just coming down with my mom. I opened the door, positively awestruck and speechless. I mean, she had always tucked this guy up to me. There was no human on earth that was tucked up to me more than the doctor that saved my life. And this guy was right here in front of me. So I handed him the card. I didn't know what else to say, so I handed him the card. He opens the card, reads the card, says, "I'm sorry, son, I think you've made some kind of a mistake." I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "You shouldn't be thanking me. I should be thanking you." He goes, "You know what's haunted me? Every time I save a baby throughout my career, by this point, he'd been doing it for some 40 years. He says, every time I save a life, I don't know whether it's going to be the next Adolf Hitler or the next Mother Teresa. And in my career, you're probably the only third one that's ever come back to let me know what the heck's going on." And so he says, "I need to be thanking you because you've continued to do work you were laid out to do." And he says, "I didn't save your life. You saved your life. You had to fight." He says, "I'll be honest with you. We discussed it. And if there was one of them that was bound to survive, it was going to be your brother." Guess what, folks? Somebody had other plans. The loss of my brother's life saved lives. And here I am yet today, trying to change lives as much as I humanly can. Now, I share that story for this reason. What would have happened had that doctor made another career choice?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the career choice is to bring things back full circle. You could be working at McDonald's, and if your why is right, you can change a life.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%.
I mean, so many people figure, I don't have the skills to be a public speaker, or I don't have the skills to do this. I don't have the skills to do that. I don't have the skill. Well, you know what? I was born without the skill to live, according to medical science. Somehow we figured it out.
I was going to say, I don't have the skill to do a podcast, but here I am.
Well, and I'm probably giving you more material than you need, but if you need to break it into a couple of different episodes, that's cool too. Because I think it is important. In fact, after our first conversation, for those of you that don't know, we tried to tape this earlier in the week and couldn't get a solid enough internet connection to get it accomplished. So we ended up just shooting the breeze for a while.
Yeah, for like an hour, and I noticed
And
during
then
that
turn
time
around
we
and
had great
rescheduled it.
connection.
And I still think he probably got more information than he wanted, but I got from there and I went in and I honest to God told Mom. I said, the guy's podcast is on Career Paths. Not exactly sure, being a full-time college student at 44, what I'm bringing to the table. But I'm going to go with it and see where it goes.
Yeah. You're bringing your life experience, for one, of how you've gotten through some of that stuff. That's inspiration to others that are having challenges going to college, just that might not even have disabilities of any sort, and they're finding it difficult. Well, they're going to look back and go, well, I'm kind of being a little bit of a weenie if I'm complaining right now. And this guy's been going to college a lot longer and is still going with all, everything he has to go through.
Well, I'll tell you the honest truth. Here's another interesting wrinkle to the challenges from high school to college. I graduated from high school having never put a written word down on paper.
Wow.
I would dictate it into a tape recorder, somebody else would type it up. Because at that point, the voice recognition technology, now you're talking the mid-90s, the voice recognition technology was there, but you were talking $10,000 plus another $3,000 in a computer that I didn't have. And so I didn't even have access to what is now even the version I use now is the best out there, and it's $600 just for the software itself, but that's much better. It used to be 15 grand.
Right.
And it's only that expensive because I needed the legal dictionary to go behind it. For home use, you can pick it up for $100 now.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is I was graduating from high school having no idea of proper grammar. I could verbally structure a sentence, but written word was different than spoken word.
Right.
And I was graduating from high school, going into one of the most demanding colleges on the face of the earth, with the first written thing that I ever produced, because I finally got access to the right technology to do it, being my entrance essay into that institution. What on God's green earth am I going to do? The answer? Hey, Mom, what do we do about this? Mom went to the school, says, I need a graduate student in English. They gave me somebody that was a PhD student for a mentor. The woman was a taskmaster. Let me tell you, she went to each of my professors. She made the arrangements that, the assignment may be in late, but I guarantee you ain't going to have to check it for grammar. You ain't going to have to check it for mechanics, because I will not allow him to turn it in until it's perfect. Coming from somebody that's getting a PhD in how to do this type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how many hours I spent redrafting certain documents. Some of them were 2 or 3 weeks late, but you turn them in and they were perfect. Well, I went from absolutely zero writing ability to arguably at least a master's, if not a PhD level writing skill in 6 to 8 weeks.
Well,
why?
That's impressive.
Because that's what it was going to take to survive. I got news for you. If you've got a dream and you're not willing to put in the 14, 16, sometimes 18-hour days, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
Dream building is not a 9-to-5 job. The reason my podcast hasn't taken off is because, quite frankly, I just haven't had the time. I've taken the time and been blessed with the opportunity to do your show. I did the Brian Hartson show. I'm in negotiation with Robert Foster to do his show about some of the more physical dynamics of the disability, some of the stuff that we didn't get into, that I didn't
Yeah.
get into really in depth here. But I guess, like I said, the easy takeaways are very simple. You gotta have a why. After you figure out the why will actually give you the what, believe it or not. Because I wanted to make systemic change within the legal system after seeing some of the stuff that I saw, was what gave me the passion to understand it more thoroughly. Because my original what was broadcast journalism, folks.
Yeah.
The why gives you the what. The why, if you know how to use it, gives you the how as well. Because you just figure it out. And Mom gave me a piece of advice that I used to this day that probably is useful for anything in life, and that is, don't waste your time trying to get answers from people that can't help you solve your problem. To use a medical example as to how that applies, because I guess if you would say I've had a lifelong career, it's been as a medical patient. Don't waste your time asking if you can help it, don't waste your time asking the gal that comes in to change your trash, to change your med regimen. It's going to take a doctor's order. Cut through as much of the crap as you can.
Yeah.
Life's too short. Yeah, the system doesn't like that very much. But you know what? Ultimately, you're paying them, depending on the setting.
Yeah.
You work for them, not the other way around. They work for you. So, and if you don't have a dream, if you don't have an end game to chase, get up and try a few things. My God,
That's it too.
My God,
get out there and try something.
We've got people making thousands of dollars doing just exactly what you and I are doing right here.
Yeah.
TikTok only has 30-second videos. Okay, folks? Yes, it takes a lot of time to get it, but there are people making a living that way.
Yeah.
That's fine. You wanna go to work for Ryan, building houses or flipping houses? I'm sure he'd be more than happy to talk to you. I can tell you, based on our previous conversation, though, that you best not plan quit working at noon.
Yeah.
Because he's going to run
That's for
circles
sure.
around. So, number one, get your why. Get what gets you out of bed in the morning. And then figure out what you're going to do with that time. Realize that time is not a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
There are
On
days
that-
that my day starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because that's what my body will do.
Right.
On the other hand, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I've got to be going by 5:45 to make an 8 o'clock class. Why? Because it takes me that extra 2.5 hours to get ready. And no, it's not a woman putting on makeup at the mirror, folks. That's a whole other story. But, you know, I mean, I get so tired of these people that one of the things that drives me nuts is these people that have done something usually to a lower extremity, which leaves them in in a chair for a short period of time, you know, or possibly permanently, but at least initially a short period of time. And you could always tell it by the type of chair that they're in. Because I've got a livable chair. I live in mine.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't weigh 80 pounds. It's not like those that you get at the hospital. It's customized to me.
Right.
You wouldn't believe how many times people come up to me and say, oh, I spent 2 or 3 weeks in a chair once. I know exactly what you're going through.
Mhm.
How absurd is that?
Exactly.
You know, and my compromise there when I want to say that to somebody is, you know what, I think I might be able to empathize, even though I may not be able to relate.
Yeah.
Because I've been in a world that, like I say, it's on a spectrum. Even cerebral palsy itself can go from catatonic, completely nonverbal, pretty much just existing till you die,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, to barely physically affected, but possibly some cognitive involvement,
Yeah.
and anywhere in between. The disability that most people have right now and need to overcome is not knowing their why. Most people are physically capable of doing anything they'd set their mind to if they go get the right kind of training.
Right.
Most people's minds are capable of getting where I'm at. In that sense, if you've got enough drive, my results may be atypical, but they don't have to be, folks. That's the message here. Get your why, get off your butt, and get it done.
All right. One last question. As a kid, what was it that you wanted to be? Did you want to be like an astronaut or?
Actually, before I realized my limitations, what I thought I was going to do was be a police officer.
Really?
But which makes it, looking back on it now, makes it no wonder that I ended up in criminal justice. I just had to go through a lot of, you know, I'll be honest, most of my legal training right now is in police procedure. Because I am in a school that is focused on turning out cops.
Yeah.
Not lawyers. But you know what? That's why the planning for the next step is so important. I'm getting the right, I'm getting that BA after my name so that I then can go to a program that is more focused in where I need to be.
Yeah.
And that's the key. You can't always think 2 or 3 steps ahead like I've done. But I guarantee you, you're not going to get to step 3 if you don't get to step 1.
Yeah.
And just as a parting thing here, if I can get this to show. For those of you that may not be able to see it that clearly, that's a rendition of the tortoise that was drawn for me when I was born, with angel wings to pay tribute to my brother.
That's awesome.
I live this philosophy, folks. Only those that stick their necks out. It takes sticking your neck out to not only survive, but it also takes it to succeed.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the takeaway from all of this is, and that's the takeaway that I've spent my life giving. You know, when I was doing the legal defense work, there was some of it that, yes, I didn't, as an individual, I didn't agree with the result that I had to advocate for. But in my in my heart of hearts, justice demanded that I give it my best shot.
Yeah.
I had 2 cases that my boss thought was unwinnable that ended up in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And I won.
That's
I
awesome.
could have very easy, and my boss admitted it when he handed it to me. He says, here, these are unwinnable, but they need worked anyway. It was for the same guy. I quite frankly, I was making a First Amendment claim because he was putting stickers in places that he shouldn't have been putting stickers. Ridiculous legal brief. I'll be the first to admit it. But we're in a country that has the First Amendment. You've got the freedom to think. And that's what I like to remind people of. There is no law limiting what's going on up here.
Yeah.
So use it.
All right, with that, I got to wrap up. Earl, thank you very much for being on the show. Hope to get you back on here again. And I know we have talked about working on some other projects together and stuff, so I'll keep people informed on that. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Career Paths by Infonet. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, leave a message. We'll talk to you next time. It's your life. Make it happen. Thanks.